future Emperor of Arrakis. Greetings once again. Today we're going to talk about everything you need to know. How to build, which overpowered weapons exist in the game, which armors are best suited for PvP or PvE, and what the ideal combinations are to get the most out of the arsenal that Dune Awakening has to offer.
Let's start with melee weapons, specifically long blades and short blades. In practice, every weapon you fight in the game, whether it's made of duraluminum, iron or ideally plastinium, has unique adaptabilities based on its schematic. We are talking about basic versions with no bonuses here, but the real schematic based weapons you can loot from crates or crash sites. For example, you might come across a sword like the Hagga's pick, which deals around 140 damage on a long blade and applies stacking poison with each hit. Once the stacks build up, the target, whether a player or enemy, becomes poisoned. Then there's another blade that applies fire damage instead, or one that restores a portion of your stamina with every hit, which is great, especially when you are fighting multiple opponents. And there is one more I haven't unlocked yet that causes bleeding on hit. So these are the main types. The same applies to long blades in general. Essentially, there are 4 special melee effects. One causes burn, one inflicts poison, one triggers bleeding, and one returns stamina per hit. The stamina return isn't clearly defined, but from my experience, it's around 10% per strike. I personally play with the replica pulse knife, which gives stamina back, and it lets me efficiently take down 3 or 4 enemies quickly using combos and abilities. In terms of stats, long blades usually deal about 160 damage, while short blades do around 140. But it's not just about raw damage. There's also attack speed and a delay on heavy attacks. Short blades tend to be faster and their attacks are harder to interrupt, making them especially effective when you are outnumbered. You don't need to charge your strikes as much and you can eliminate enemies faster. That's why I prefer the shorter blades. When it comes to skills, you've got 2 main paths. The Swordmaster, who gives you up to a 15% bonus to long blade damage, and the Bene Gesserit, who grants the same bonus but for short blades. Both also have an additional 9% boost to overall blade damage, so if you specialize in short blades like I do, you get a total of 34% extra melee damage, 15% from the short blade bonus, plus 18% from the general damage boosts. That's a big deal and I highly recommend it. The same principle applies to long blades if that's your preference. These bonuses really start to show once you are specialized. Personally, when I play PvP or PvE, I go in with nothing but my knife. I don't even touch ranged weapons, the only exception being certain tools like the Regis launcher or Alula's gun, but we'll get to those later.
Now let's move on to ranged weapons, anything that's not melee. Once you start digging into the research tree, you'll see there's a massive variety to choose from. Plasma cannons, sniper rifles, burst weapons, drill shots, the list goes on. There's a lot to explore. One weapon I highly recommend is the Regis Disruptor pistol. The lower tier duraluminum version is actually a reward for completing the Bene Gesserit trial. Once you finish all the capstone skills, you get this pistol that deals around 360 damage per shot. That's enough to break most enemy shields in just 2 or 3 hits. It's an impressive weapon for sure. But be aware, it's a charged weapon, it's not your typical pew-pew blaster. You'll need about 1.5 seconds to charge it up before firing a powerful bolt that really packs a punch. So while it's not ideal for long-range sniping, it can still be very effective, especially in close to mid-range combat. I used it for a while and in deep desert it can 2-shot headshot enemies, so it definitely has potential. Then there are rifles, some people like them, but personally I don't recommend them. Most stations and wrecks in deep desert are tight enclosed spaces where you just don't get the distance to properly snipe. Plus, a lot of enemies have shields. Some rifles do have special effects, like exploding on contact with a shield and applying splash or poison damage, but those are lower tier assassination weapons. You won't find many of those in plastinium quality, so I wouldn't focus on them unless you're at that level. When it comes to heavy weapons, I only really use the Regis missile launcher. It deals 800 damage and is perfect when I'm farming solo or heading into PvP zones where I might run into enemy players flying around in helicopters. I take around 30 missiles with me and can take someone down in 2 or 3 shots. It's seriously OP and it doesn't weigh much, only about 5 kilograms. The only thing is, it has no auto aim, so you have to be accurate. It's essentially an anti-vehicle weapon and it works great for that role. Next up are scatterguns. These weapons are designed to penetrate shields. If you've ever noticed a red glow around your character even when your shield is up and then suddenly you take big damage, that's a scattergun doing its thing. They pierce your shield after about 2 seconds. You can counter this by dashing. If you dash in time, you'll cancel the penetration effect and the shot won't go through. Some mobs in PvP actually know how to do this, and you can learn the technique from watching them, though it does drain a lot of stamina. There are 2 main types of scatterguns. One is more like a traditional shotgun with an effective range of about 8 meters. The other has a much longer range, up to 54 meters. Some shoot in bursts, some fire single shots. Always read the weapon's description to understand what it does. The long-range variants are excellent mid to long-range weapons, but only within their limit. Once you go beyond 50 meters, scatterguns start to lose their shield penetrating effect. The damage still hits, but it no longer bypasses the shield directly. The animation doesn't trigger, and you just deal regular shield damage. So yeah, they're powerful, but situational. Within 50 meters, they're amazing. You can even take down elite enemies in just 5 or 6 shots. They're also great against melee mobs if you struggle with parrying or dashing. Before I mastered parry and built a stamina-focused melee build, I used a combo of melee and drill shot, which let me solo stations just fine. I had the gear and the guts for it, so that's what I'd recommend. Other ranged weapons? Honestly, not really worth it, at least not in most situations. And with that, let's dive into building your optimal PvP setup. Now let's move into the PvP section, specifically weapons for PvP combat. Before we dive into armor later, just a heads up, I plan to release more videos covering how to destroy player bases in deep desert, because if you've ever found a base and tried to take it down, you've probably noticed it's not exactly straightforward. That's because bases can only be damaged during a storm. When a sandstorm sweeps through the sector, base shields shift their focus toward withstanding environmental pressure. That's your window, the moment they become vulnerable, but you'll also be taking storm damage yourself, so it's a high-risk opportunity. This is when you want to use either a rocket launcher or what I'm holding right now, the les gun. You can earn this weapon, I believe, either by completing the final questline for the Mentat or the Trooper, one of those. The les gun doesn't use ammo. Instead, it fires energy beams that slice through structures like butter. Of course, I'm not going to demo it on my own base, I'm not crazy, but the beam draws power from your power pack. So the bigger your power pack, the better. Ideally, you'll want to find a schematic in deep desert for a high-capacity power pack that not only boosts your total energy pool, but also reduces power consumption. You can further improve this by using the Planetologist skill tree, which can give you up to 40 extra power. I don't have enough skill points left for that myself, but it's worth it if you do. On top of that, you can increase your les gun damage via the Trooper skill line, specifically the heavy weapon damage bonuses. If you fully invest about 8 skill points, you can get a 15% boost, which is a pretty big deal. Another thing I recommend is acquiring the power harness, either by finding its schematic or by earning it as a reward from the landsraad. Some houses will offer it once you hit the 10,500 milestone in tier 4, so keep an eye out. The harness adds 50 power to your max capacity, which when combined with a good power pack brings your total up to something like 890 base energy. Here's a pro tip: activate smoking mode with the Z key. It gives you a temporary buff that both increases your damage output and decreases energy consumption from your power pack. That basically gives you unlimited lasgun energy for a while, letting you melt through enemy structures without worrying about running dry. If you do everything right, the buffs, the gear, the skills, you can destroy a 10,000 HP foundation, like the upgraded Harkonnen or Atreides Plastone variant, in just 7 to 8 seconds.
But heads up, sometimes you'll see an error like emergency venting or current fire detected. That happens if the structure has only one exit. In those cases, it can't be destroyed. So instead of wasting shots on locked doors or high entrances, target floors, ceilings or foundations for faster results. Never aim for pentashields. Lasguns can't destroy those. All you'll do is burn through your power and run out of time before the storm ends. So in my opinion, the lasgun is the most efficient base breaking tool. Sure, you can try to use a rocket launcher, but unless you've got the schematic that does 1100 damage per shot, it's not going to cut it solo. And even then, you'd need at least 2 players firing to bring a strong base down in time. So again, lasgun all the way. You can even find a Plaston tier schematic for the lasgun and craft it yourself. There's an achievement tied to that, by the way, so it's another good reason to go after it. If nothing else, it gives you a little extra motivation. And that wraps up the PvP section. Now let's head back to talk about armor.
Now let's move on to armor, the final phase. I'm not going to focus on vehicle armor here, like the kind you'd use in helicopters, because in the deep desert, you mostly run into players using toxic loadouts or just flying around with assault ships and rocket launchers to engage in air-to-air combat. So ground combat is what we'll really focus on, though I'll mention both. Personally, I am a bit of a minimalist and a hoarder at the same time. I mostly stick to basic gear from quests and rarely bother crafting new stuff. For example, I'm using this jackal set, mostly because I like how it looks. That's honestly enough for me. Now, if you open your character stats panel, you can see all your equipment, your total armor, and what kind of damage mitigation you're getting. That is, how much damage your armor reduces, shown in percentages. More armor, it's more mitigation, obviously. You'll also see bonuses like hydration protection, stamina costs, dehydration resistance, and so on. If you're mainly playing PvE, running stations solo or in small groups, fighting mobs rather than hunting players, I strongly recommend bringing at least one steel suit. The best one currently is the Valaris Steel Suit Garment. It gives you 228 armor, improves your hydration capture, meaning you'll survive longer without water, and offers great heat protection, which is super useful if you're farming spice or other resources in the sun. What's great is that the steel suit only covers your chest and legs, so you can mix and match the rest of your gear freely. If you're doing mostly PvP or high-level PvE, I recommend switching to light armor. Why? Because stamina consumption really starts to matter, especially if you're playing solo. Light armor significantly reduces stamina cost when dashing or using abilities, which helps a lot in staying alive. One example is the light armor garment, which both lowers stamina use and increases your mitigation. A solid combo. There are also gloves that further reduce stamina cost for dashing, though I haven't unlocked those yet. Certain boots also give extra mitigation against melee, light darts and heavy darts. Now, some heavy armors offer better mitigation, yes, but the downside is they massively increase dash stamina cost. You'll go from being able to dash 4 times down to maybe 2. That's a big deal, especially solo. Honestly, when I die, it's rarely because I lose the fight, it's because I run out of stamina. And once you're out, you're basically dead. You won't even have time to self-revive before they finish you off. After recent resurrection updates, you now have even less margin for error. Sure, heavy sets like the full chome give you massive armor, say 1800 in total if you max out everything, but the mitigation cap is around 75%. Once you hit that, piling on more armor gives diminishing returns. For example, going from 500 to 800 armor only gives you about 6% more mitigation. Not worth it. And here's the real kicker. Most of that mitigation doesn't help against melee. In fact, many armor pieces actually give you negative melee resistance, like -6%, -8%, even -12%. Add it up and you're taking 30 to 40% bonus damage from melee attackers. That means even if you're nearly immune to ranged, one slow blade hit from a melee player could still one-shot you, especially if your stamina is drained. That's why I recommend focusing on mobility, stamina efficiency, and smart combos. Use a still suit for survival in the heat and combine it with light armor for combat. And if you want to optimize even further, keep your still suit equipped while farming and switch to a full light set when entering stations or wreck sites. Personally, I don't bother switching. I find inventory management tedious, but if you have the time and materials, it's definitely the smarter way to play.
To
wrap things up, I want to quickly recommend a few skills I personally use whether I'm playing solo or with others. First and foremost, the Shigaware Claw. The reason is obvious: mobility and the ability to stagger enemies. Yes, it has a longer cooldown, about 25 seconds, but it's totally manageable. It also doesn't require targeting range, which is honestly amazing. As a secondary skill, I use Retaliate from the Swordmaster tree. It's basically an auto parry. When triggered, it creates a splash effect in front of you that damages enemies and applies bleed for 120% of your weapon's damage. I've killed opponents in Deep Desert with just 2 of these bleeds. It's brutal, I highly recommend it. Another option I sometimes use is Leap Charge, though more often I prefer Weirding Step for better mobility. It lets you close gaps fast, great for when you're being chased by 3 melee enemies and need to strike or escape. It also staggers the enemy and briefly locks them in a vulnerable state where they can't react, perfect for turning the fight in your favor. In terms of passive techniques, I use Trauma Recovery for improved regen limits and speed. From the Swordmaster tree, I use Discipline Briefing to speed up stamina recovery and everything else that helps with stamina or healing kits. Bene Gesserit skills also boost your max HP and healing efficiency. Very handy. One of my favorite capstone techniques is Thrive on Danger. It activates when your HP drops low, reducing poison vulnerability, cutting regen delay, and giving you a massive plus 200% health regeneration. So instead of waiting 10 seconds for regen to kick in, it starts after just 2.5 seconds. And your stamina costs drop by 30% while it's active. Dashing, abilities, everything. You can stay in the fight much longer. Offering advice: if you don't have that unlocked yet, a good alternative is Battle Hardened from the Trooper tree. It reduces ability cooldowns by up to 30%, which is also very effective. Personally, I've been testing lots of builds just to unlock achievements, so I'll respec my tree soon, but I definitely recommend investing in a stable, functional PvP setup. Now keep in mind that actual PvP battles in the open world are rare unless you're entering stations or wrecks. That's why ground control is everything. The base combo: Shigaware Claw, Mentats crowd control, and maybe something like Compel or Knee Charge. Having 3 CC abilities forces your enemy to burn stamina to escape, and once they've dashed 3 times, their stamina is usually at 50% or less, which seriously limits their options. At that point, they can only use 1 or 2 more abilities, and if you're pressuring them, they'll either die or run. And remember, Spice Mode activated with Z can reduce cooldowns by 50%, letting you repeat the combo quickly. The goal is to drain their stamina fast so they can't escape or counter effectively. Now, yes, after being stamina broken, players do regenerate it back to 100% within 2 to 3 seconds, but that's your window. That's when you want to hit them with a drill shot or a blade with poison, bleed or fire effects. These status effects force them to use bandages or medkits, the only way to cleanse DOTs. If they can't heal, they'll bleed out, burn or die from poison. That's why these builds are so strong in PvP. It's not just about burst, it's about control and pressure. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this guide. Below the video you'll find all the links: my Twitch channel where I stream daily, my website magicstark.cz/Dune Awakening guides, and our Czech Slovak community Discord where we play on private Nitrado servers. We've got about 100 active members and the vibe is super chill, no griefing, no drama. If you're looking for a local supportive community to explore Dune Awakening with, this is a great place to start. Drop a like or a comment below, let me know what you think of this current PvP meta or share your own take. I'd love to hear your opinion. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. That's it from me, take care and I'll see you in the next video.